Yes. I'm competing with you guys the entire week. Here's the thing is like again, I would recommend playing all of them because that gives you more money to do bigger designs and better designs. So, But yeah, it's a game between us both to see how good we can do. Basically, here's how I'm playing it: is I will play it to beat you, and then once I beat you, I'll pretty much stop. I say pretty much because like there was a design change that I made, obviously, and I kept pushing it to the limit. And then I was like, okay, this design's done. So then I'm just going to leave that score up there. Now, if you beat that, I'm going to start playing that version again. But you see, the thing is, if someone else has got to be challenging me in other places, because then that'll force me to play other games so that you guys can kind of branch it out and try to defend me. You can work together.
What if two people have the same
Same score?
Yeah, like say somebody else has 123.
Well, then I'm just going to give you both to you.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a fair way of handling that.
This might be the same.
Yes, I am.
Well, like,
Okay, so is this the long haul?
oh no, I just started going.
This is the cruise control. So the objective is to get to 100% distance as fast as possible. You're already at All right, guys. Ignore those page numbers. I thought I'd erase them, but I didn't. All right, I'm not going to have you guys write these terms because we're going to talk about them. But for those who are following us for posterity, you can see them. Smelt, not like smelting. That's a process of metallurgy. Understand this. All metals come from the ground. Whenever you pull metals out of the ground, they're part of an ore. That's a rock. It's got all kinds of minerals in it. To get out the iron or whatever else you want, you have to smelt it, which is basically removing the impurities. So the process of smelting involves heating it to a very high temperature, so melting that out, so that everything else, which is what you don't want, floats to the top. You skim that off, it's called the slag, and you have pure iron, more or less. That's important, because impurities mean weaknesses. You guys, of course, know of the Titanic, yes? Famous steamship, which basically was famous for sinking and being really, really big. But the problem with the Titanic wasn't that it just hit an iceberg. What happened was the iron that it was made out of was actually impure. It had too much sulfur in it, which meant it was brittle. Brittle means it breaks. So that hole that caused it to sink, way bigger than it would have been if it was proper iron. But it was done in a quick way. Basically, the owners who wanted to push out the Titanic wanted it to be pushed out as fast as conceivable, so that they could get it out there and making money, what have you. Well, this meant they cut corners, which resulted in a lot of people dead. So that's where people make the joke sometimes. Remember that whenever you're in an elevator, it was the person who put it in, the person who built it, was basically the person who's going to do it for the cheapest price, which is kind of unsettling. Anyhow, let's talk life for the average person. That's pretty great. How do most people make a living during the age of Napoleon? What career did they have? Yeah. What career did they have, do you think? Most people did what? Farmers, yeah. Most people lived on family farms. Now consider this. What is life like on a family farm? I have no idea. Seriously though, you can watch TV shows, you watch YouTube videos and what that's like. Basically, it's a lot of work, constantly. Work. Furthermore, it's not exactly like you deal with money. It's not like the land has like money trees that are printing off cash for you. You deal almost exclusively in food. Your entire life is basically getting resources for you to survive. Food, water, shelter, taking care of animals, whatever happens to be the case. As far as paying taxes are concerned, you pay it with money you get from selling excess food. You also owe money because odds are very, very good that you don't actually own the land you work. Instead, there's a landlord to whom you owe money. Guys, the reason you're chatting so loud I can hear you from all the way over here. By the way, it's also recording you, so in case there's anything inappropriate there. So, moving on. So life is pretty much wrapped up around this. I can tell you this experience because my grandfather, that's how he lived. He wrote a set of memoirs that basically talked about his life during the Great Depression. His family wasn't really that much affected by the Great Depression because they never dealt with cash. They made everything they had. That included clothing, even shoes, if need be. I believe they tried to buy shoes once a year with any leftovers they had, but during the Great Depression, just kind of had to make do. They did some pretty crazy things because they needed it. For instance, lumber's expensive. Wood, going and buying wood is expensive. So what they did is they cut down trees. However, it's kind of hard to get the proper shapes you want for trees. So what they did is they took a truck they had actually, it was a Ford truck, that they then jacked up, pulled the wheels off, and put a saw blade attached to the truck. My grandfather, when he was about 6, was told to sit in the truck cab and press the accelerator so that the blade would spin faster or slower as they needed. That's insane. But you do what you need to. And they milled their own lumber because that's what they had to do. Obviously, they didn't have cars in the time of Napoleon, so they had to make do with other means. Axes, saws, that sort of thing. So life was very hands-on. It also meant that you worked constantly. But for the most part, this is how people have been living for centuries. Life hasn't changed that much. It's going to be completely and utterly revolutionized, though, by technology. You see, we have to understand there's a few things that are going to change during the Industrial Revolution. Technology is going to change everything. And the first thing you have to really understand when we talk about industrialization is time equals money. You guys have heard this expression a lot, yes? Time is money. Think about it this way. There's an economics principle called opportunity cost. Essentially, if you choose to do one thing, you have to give up something else. Yes? For instance, if you want to spend time watching TV, you have to give up doing something that would provide you more lucrative choices. For instance, you can work that hour instead. Any money you can make working is money that is not in your pocket now because you chose to do something else. Does that make sense? To put it another way, take every hour of the day times the amount of money you can make working a job. $8 an hour, $12 an hour, whatever. Okay, that's your maximum economic output in a day. Of course, you can't really do that. You couldn't work 24 hours a day without collapsing dead. Eventually, it would exhaust you. So you have to basically give up some of that money for rest, for time spent with loved ones, whatever this case may be. But this concept is going to be principal when it comes to industrializing. The Industrial Revolution is all about getting more out of your time. For instance, if you're a manufacturer, you're producing something like cars or even clothing. If I can produce more in a shorter period of time, if I can produce 2 coats instead of 1 per hour, that is doubling my profit, yes? Or 4, or 12, or 32, whatever. My objective as a business person is to maximize the amount of production I can have in the shortest period of time because time equals money. Machines make this possible. Machines can do things much faster than we can do by hand. How many of you guys have ever done any sewing projects before? You try sewing something by hand versus doing it on a sewing machine. Sewing it by hand takes hours. The sewing machine is done. This is true for everything you could ever do, make or what have you. Machines can do it better, faster, and more efficiently than you can. It's just by their very nature. They're good at one thing and one thing only. So there's going to be a lot of changes because of that. But technology also benefits people in a lot of ways. For instance, one of the biggest technological innovations that we're going to look at is changes to medicine. In particular, the use of anesthetics. You guys know what an anesthetic is? Painkiller, sure. There's all kinds of anesthetics. Obviously, there's ones that knock you out cold, so you're not even wait for it. There's also anesthetics that numb whatever it is you're talking about. topical anesthetics, things like that. If, like, for instance, you get stitches in the hospital, they're going to use a topical, they're not going to knock you unconscious, you know what I'm saying? So what this benefits us, obviously, we don't want to feel pain. Consider this, most surgeries before this introduction of anesthetics were done with the full feeling of somebody on the other end. In other words, if you're getting surgery, you're awake and you can feel it. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, people usually pass out due to the pain after a little while, but it's still a really brutal experience. The anesthetic of choice during this age is laudanum. Laudanum is a tincture of opium and alcohol, basically a solid introduced into a liquid. Contrary to popular belief, most people would not have consumed massive amount of alcohol before surgeries. Think about it. What does alcohol do to your blood? It thins it out. Does that sound like a good thing to do before you get surgery? Unless you want to bleed out, no, you don't do that. Laudanum, on the other hand, uses opium as its main agent. Opium comes from poppy seeds, from the poppy flower. To put it in perspective of its power, whenever it's been harnessed and utilized, opium is what we make heroin out of, and morphine for that matter, which is still used in hospitals to this day. It's a very effective painkiller, but also is incredibly addictive. The thing is, this was actually seen as a miracle drug when it was first introduced. I mean, it can take away pain. Think about how often we use painkillers in our day-to-day lives. Ibuprofen, aspirin, things like that. This was their aspirin. They took it all the time. It was sold in drugstores over the counter. There were no prescriptions at that time, nor there were any restrictions on drugs of any kind. I saw advertisements during the 1800s for this stuff, telling you things like, use it for babies who are teething. Does it help with baby teething? Yes, absolutely. It also makes them high as a kite. Seriously, it was used for everything. Got a stomach ache? Laudanum. You feeling a little bit jittery? Laudanum. You nervous? Laudanum. You a little bit bored? Laudanum. It's fun. It is also, you see what that says? Poison! All drugs are poisons. They kill you. That's something that we don't quite realize. Most things we consider as drugs kill you if you have too much of it.
How do you spell that?
Poison? P-O-I-S.
No.
I'll bet you. Laudanum. It's L-A-U-D-A-N-U-M. Laudanum. Anyways, needless to say, there was a lot of problems with drug abuse during the 1800s. But the thing is, this was seen as kind of your problem, not mine. Of course, that's sort of an old-fashioned view of things, because basically what that's saying is that society can't benefit from people who aren't drugged out. Of course, nowadays we realize that drugs are kind of a bad thing. However, limiting their usage is kind of hard as well. Hence why there's all these issues of legalization and controls. But ultimately, that's not why we started limiting the usage of drugs. The reason we stopped allowing everyone to take whatever drugs they wanted was because of racism. You see, why was marijuana made illegal in the first place? Because it was a drug associated with Mexicans. And we hated Mexicans so much in this country, we wanted them to stay out of the country so much, that basically we thought, well, if we ban marijuana, they're going to start coming in here because they can't deal without marijuana. Seriously. The belief was, really, and I'm not making this up, you can look it up, that Mexicans were just scheming about how to rape white women, so they would use drugs in order to drug them, and then they could lure them into their houses and places of business and then have their way with them, and then, God forbid, there'd be mixed children born in this country. Seriously, that is why. There is so much racism in the 1900s you would not even believe. But anyways, the benefits, though, are tremendous. Not so much the drug use part, but the fact that, consider this, there's all kinds of surgeries that were made possible by this. For instance, are you guys familiar with exploratory surgery? All right, consider this. You have something wrong with you that is inside of your body. How do we know what's wrong? Nowadays, what do? We could use an ultrasound, sure. What else? X-ray, yeah.
You can swallow pills with camera in it and then you can see.
Yeah, you can do a scope, which is an unpleasant experience. Yeah, it's not so much a pill. It's like there's a cord.
That was not an actual. You have an actual. Don't they have like an actual pill now?
I think it's an experimental phase. They haven't passed it for use. Like the FDA still got to pass it. But, I mean, they're working on that because let's be honest, getting scopes not pleasant because the cord is still attached. Yeah, they have to intubate you. It's an unpleasant experience. But anyway, there's all kinds of things involved that we can explore on you. But here's the thing: is even all of those sometimes fail. My mother, for example, a number of years ago had a problem with her shoulder. She kept like hurting for no foreseeable reason. She would try to play her violin and it would just start hurting her. So she went to the doctor. They did X-rays and CAT scans, whole shebang. They couldn't find what was wrong. So basically, they were left with one alternative: exploratory surgery. Essentially, they cut you open and root around, see what they can find out what's wrong. It's a gruesome process when you think about it, but the thing is, it's not like they're just kind of like, it's not like the person isn't a trained professional surgeon. It's not like they get a job, Joe Schmo from the corner. It's like, well, let's see what's in there. We're running around. These guys know what they're doing. They can do it without hurting you. But the thing is, think about doing that without painkillers. No. So,
I'd like to.
some people did. You had to. Because you think about it, there's a lot of things which, while it sounds really brutal and awful and terrible, it beats the alternative. Because the alternative is living with it. Have you guys ever had any dental problems before? Like problems with your teeth? There's not much more agony I can imagine than having bad teeth. Now, please understand, this is not my experience personally. This is someone I know who basically had a tooth get infected, needed a root canal, and didn't go. He just dealt with the pain every day of his life. Pain that was so bad, he had to lay down a few times a day or he would pass out.
Why didn't he just?
He was stubborn. He was his own admission, he was an idiot. So eventually he went and they had to yank the tooth out. It was so bad, the infection would have gone to his bone and probably killed him. But he was afraid of the dentist. Now consider this. The way you remove a tooth nowadays, they can use painkillers, they can do all kinds of things, and other than the fact that there's somebody with their knee pressed against your chest that they're yanking, it's not that bad of an experience. We all have to get it done at some point or other. Most of us, when you get your wisdom teeth out, for instance. But in his case, he also was telling, he did a lot of studies on this, and one of the things that he talks about is the way that would have done it in the 1800s. The way they removed bad teeth in time was with a device called the tooth key. Just let that name sink into you for a second. A tooth key. Here's what it did, actually. Basically, imagine a wooden handle like this with a metal bar coming out of it. On that bar on the other end was a hook. So what they would do is this hook was on a hinge. They would put that up against your jaw, the metal part, and the hook would come over top the tooth. And basically, they would tell you, all right, hold on, 1, 2, and they would twist that lever. That lever would have the hook, it would grab the top of the tooth and just basically using leverage would pull it out. It would hurt like crazy when it was done, but as soon as that tooth is out, oh God, it feels so much better. I've seen kids do this whenever they have a loose tooth. Basically the same process, only what they do is they tie a string around their tooth, tie the other string around the door, and slam.
I can't do that.
I think I tried doing that, but I totally did that.
Again, is it gonna hurt? Yes, but you feel better after that. Laudanum made exploratory surgery possible, which basically led to more people staying alive. Think about finding cancer before there's an X-ray, before there's any of these other miracle devices that exist. You know what I'm saying? Was it brutal? Yes. Would we want to choose that? No. But the alternative was death. The alternative was pain. Consider this. If you're weighing pain for the rest of my life versus pain for a moment, then I feel better, what are you going to choose? So you can see why they chose things the way they did. Did it take them working up their courage to do it? You better believe it. There's a reason why people tried to not go through this. But when the alternative is these other things, you eventually just kind of have to suck it up. All right, sorry about this. It's really, really small, but I'll continue to explain. Hang on. Let me go back for a second because I want to make sure I didn't miss something. I thought I was talking about something else. No? Okay, that must be further on. All right, so here you go. First, we have to understand the concept when it comes to starting a business. Okay? There's three things we need to start a business. Do you guys know what they are? You hear this in economics all the time. Land, labor, and capital. You guys know what capital is, I assume, because we've talked about it a number of times. I heard someone just literally say, just now, it's money, yeah, it's cash. So we need cash. This is obvious. To start a business, you got to have startup money to get things ready. It doesn't matter whatever business you're into, you got to have cash. That's obvious. What about land? What type of land do we need? Well, to be perfectly honest, that really depends on the business, doesn't it? If it's a farm, well, we need farmland. But what if it's a manufacturing? Like if I'm going to make cars, what do I need? A building? What type of building? Right, yeah, factory. Think about what is a factory, guys? It's a building with what in it? Machines, yeah. The idea is we have one building where we can bring people into it to work my machines. That's what a factory does, what it is. Now, here's the thing is, that's only 2/3. We also need labor. We need people to work our machines, yes? Well, as we're going to see, due to the massive amount of trade brought on by the Columbian Exchange, we got the capital. It's out there, we have. Also the invention of joint stock companies, it's there. As far as the land, technology is going to allow us to build these factories, no problem. The problem, we need labor. And it just so happens that the technology introduced is going to create labor. You see, there's this great relationship between machines and people. Understand this now. Machines will always be better at something than you are. No matter what that is, machine will be better at it. This is just how it is. The problem that we face in a post-industrial economy is that machines are continually being developed to replace human work. That's actually, think about it. Think about what the dream, ideal society would be. No one has to work. Machines do everything for us. That actually is scary to some people. Well, the thing about that is that's not actually possible. How do I know? Because machines do not think. The whole idea of artificial intelligence is fallacious. It can't exist.
One robot, he had a heart.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not possible. The thing is, first of all, let me say, great movie. Great movie. It was originally written by Isaac Asimov back in the early 20th century. He was postulating all these ideas. The thing is, though, the idea that we can create an intelligence that develops on its own, we can't do that. Because ultimately, a machine falls back to its programming. Machines are incredibly literal things. They will take it exactly as you say. They don't really interpret things one way or the other. So this whole idea of them going off and planning things like Skynet and Terminator and all that nonsense doesn't exist. It can't happen. The thing is that the whole idea of us being useless is what scares us. The thing is that the utopian idea is that we have machines to do the hard work for us. That allows us to do even better things. We can think. We can develop individual person. Think about this one. If you could do whatever you wanted to do and not have to worry about food, shelter, medicine, it was all taken care of for you. You could literally do whatever you wanted. If that was sit on your couch and play video games and watch Netflix 24/7, you can do that. But think about this as an alternative. Because there's two two sides of this. Because then there's a big question, well, then no one would do anything. We would be just a worthless, lazy society. Consider this. How long would it take for you doing it before you're just like bored? You see, you guys are like, oh, how can you do that for? No, you can't. No one can do nothing 24/7 and feel fine. I mean, seriously, what would you contribute ever to conversations? I mean, you would be bored. Most Americans are this way. I don't know anyone, whenever like I've talked to real adults, like you would never work. I mean, now most Americans I know would be like, yeah, I'd work less. You know, if you could work part-time and that would take care of all your needs, yeah, they choose to do that. But that's not how our economy works. Our economy depends upon you wanting to go work and things like that. So this is creating a big, interesting question about the nature of how the economy is going to develop. But that's the ideal. That's not how it works, though. What tends to happen, really, is machines replace one job, but that creates new jobs. Example, machines in farming. There's going to be a big change in production of farms. Jethro Tull invents a machine called a seed drill. That revolutionizes farming because it makes everything a lot easier to do. Do you guys know how farmers generally have seeded fields for centuries? They have a basket of seeds and they do this. All day long, which is incredibly inefficient. Basically, you're throwing seeds and hope they stick. What about birds picking them up and eating them? What about animals coming to get them? I mean, you're going to lose more than a large percentage of your seeds. So what some folks would do, the more efficient way, is you get a sharp stick, and you walk, and you poke a hole in the ground, you drop a seed down, you step on it, and proceed to do that for acres. Think about how many people it would take to do 20 acres in one day. It would take a lot of work, yeah? What if I told you that there was a machine invented that could do that same amount of work in 1 hour? Because that is what we have now. Because of the seed drill. It replaces hundreds of farmers. So consider this again. The farmers don't own the land. Nobles do. The nobles say, hey, I can buy one of these seed drills and replace all these people. So they do. They basically kick all these people off their farms, say, yeah, you don't get to rent it anymore, goodbye. It's not your land, you can't just stay there, it's mine, get off. What do they do now? Some farmers are going to be kept on because we still need some people to run the machine, but 2 people can be doing the work of 100. So for every 100 people, 98 now are jobless and homeless. Remember how I said we need labor for these factories? Guess where that labor is coming from? These farmers. Sure. And a large portion of these farmers are going to go and they're going to move out and they're going to try to find work in these factories, yeah? And that's going to be a process as they develop and start doing all this stuff. That's called enclosure. And that's going to make the Industrial Revolution possible. This is what the seed drill looked like. By the way, it was pulled by an animal, whether an oxen or a draft horse. And basically you had these 2 hoppers that were filled with seeds. Down below here, there's sort of this barrel-shaped rotating cylinder with these little fingers, these metallic fingers on it. And these fingers would be pushed in the dirt as these wheels turn it. And inside, these fingers are hollow, are seeds. So that as the finger comes down, gravity pulls one seed down and it reloads and then repeat. And on you go. Easy peasy. It's a great little invention. But it also means that a lot of people are without work and they got to find jobs. So where do they go? They go to cities and they start working in factories. Now, one thing I would like to point out is due to these changes in farming, suddenly there's way, way more food. The farmers benefit, or the farms, benefit because they're able to increase production, which means that they can make more money. However, what happens whenever there's a lot more of something? What happens to the cost? The price goes down. Now, the farmers are still making money despite that their crops are now worth less than they were. What this also means, though, is that your average person can now afford more food. More food equals more health. You see, we have so much food in our society. We have so much food that we can get fat. We have our nutritional needs met so much that it actually makes us sick. That's pretty crazy. That's not most of history. Most of history, you're barely having enough food to survive. So that's how efficient this is. It's amazing. The other thing is there's a better understanding of sanitation. Now, one thing I would like to talk about is bathing, because I think there's a misunderstanding that we have generally about history. A lot of people say, like, well, no one bathed back then, or they bathed like once a month. That's not true. Not the way we understand it. Did they take baths? No, they didn't. Think about how much energy it takes to heat a bathtub. How much water can the average bathtub hold, do you think? I think it's something like 15 gallons, 20 gallons, something like that. Think about how much energy it takes to heat 20 gallons of water to a satisfactory temperature. 80, 90 degrees. 80 is actually really low, 90 degrees, we'll say. That's pretty cool, actually. If you think about like your average hot tub is like 104 degrees, 103 degrees. We're talking quite cooler than that. So a lukewarm bath, we'll say. It takes a lot of energy. So they do it. It does happen, but not very frequently. Generally, their washing that they do on a daily basis is with cold water. This is like you see basins in like people's houses sometimes with a mirror in front of it. You fill it with cold water, you splash it on your face, you rub it in, maybe do the bits and pieces, and on you go. A little bit of soap, a little bit of water, dash, you're good. But that still means you still got the build up, and you still got a little. You don't stink per se, but you're also not that clean. The other thing, though, consider this, is we're not just talking about personal hygiene. We're also talking about sanitation. If you were cooking, and you were to cut up some meat, some chicken, whatever, on a cutting board, and you throw that meat into a skillet, you're cooking, whatever, what do you do with the cutting board? How do you wash it? There you go. Interesting. So you wipe it with a rag and you stuff it back into the cabinet. Yeah, you most probably put it in the dishwasher, or you wipe it down with soap and water, something like that. Why? Yeah. It's got bacteria. It can make you sick, yeah? I mean, it can. Interesting enough, wood, like butcher block, things like that, wood actually is antibacterial. You don't really have to wash it that much. But we tend to overwash things because we're paranoid of this disease. What if you didn't know about it? What if you didn't know that there were these things called germs that made you sick? Yes. Right, they're off the spine. Better just get a little bit of grease off, so you can cut your vegetables or whatever else, No big deal. Germ theory is a thing that comes about during this era. They start to realize this is what causes illness. You guys ever heard of the name Louis Pasteur? Famous French scientist. He came up with this understanding and proved that germs cause disease. So something like, oh, that's what causes disease. Well, we better wash. We better do this kind of stuff. Suddenly, people stop dying. Not like completely, obviously. We don't have like immortality, but the average age spikes. This population increase, 120 million to 190 million over the course of the 1700s, 1800s, isn't due to the fact that suddenly people are not dying, or rather, more people being born, it's because people aren't dying as often as young. All these advances in medicine, things like that, it's going to be instrumental in making people's lives better. Another thing we have to understand is energy. Energy is potential work, not electricity. We use those words interchangeably, but one is not the other. Energy is what we need to get work accomplished. Say, for instance, I want to hammer, or rather nail, two pieces of wood together. How can I accomplish this? I have a nail. I have two boards. How can I put them together? Put the wood together, and how's the nail going to get there? I can hammer it, sure. What is making that nail go through those pieces of wood? The hammer isn't doing it. Yeah! Big old bone crusher right there. Awkward. Your arm does it, yes? Your muscles are providing the energy, hammering that nail in. The hammer is just acting as a tool. It's concentrating the force you're generating into a small point, which allows you to drive that easily through wood, yeah? That's what hammering does. Is there another way I could put a nail into a board? Ah, what kind of machine could I use? What? A drill's not going to hammer. That's going to make a hole. I don't want to make a hole. I want to put a nail through it. It's called a nail gun. You have some nail guns? How does a nail gun work? Anybody know?
Shoots nails out of the thing
Yeah. What does it use to do that?
to stick nails in things.
No. What provides the power source?
The spring.
No. There is a spring in it. That just returns it to true. It compressed air. Uses an air compressor, either built in or on a separate tank. Compressed air provides enough pressure to go and shoot that nail in, which is more efficient and easier. The gun, sure. I don't know if you guys have ever used a nail gun, but let me tell you, it is a lot faster. You see guys like roofing, things like that. Trust me, I've roofed. I've done a lot of roofs. You go, done. Done. You just keep going from shingle to shingle. Put it in, set it, boom, 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 boom. Next, boom, 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 boom. Next, boom, boom. You can just go like crazy. If you're doing hammering, if you're good, you can go set, bam, set, bam, set, bam, set, bam. I am not that good. My father-in-law is. I'm not. This is how machines make things more efficient. But we have to be able to power them. The earliest forms of power were always muscles, either animals or human beings. Later, other forms of energy started to come about. Steam, wind, water, using these various forms to convert this natural processes into power. The guy who invents the steam engine, the guy who's responsible for it, is a dude named Thomas Newcomen. He invented it first. However, the guy who invents the machine that we're most familiar with is a dude named James Watt. His designs were an improvement, making the steam engine more efficient so that it could be more powerful. Now, these first steam vessels are going to be pretty weak by comparison. However, as steam engines get better and bigger and more powerful, they start changing everything. Some early uses of the steam engine include what the Darby family did. They used the machines to pump water out of their family wells. They basically produced iron. So as they were going through mining, you have water underground. I don't know if you've ever played Minecraft. So if you're sitting there picking along, suddenly your tunnels get flooded, you're a very upset panda. Well, this allowed you to pump that water outside. True story. Why you carry a bucket of water everywhere you go. But anyways, so this is a real-life application problem. However, the other thing we can use it for is for forging metal. You see, we need higher temperatures to make better quality products. How are we going to do that? You use steam power to drive bellows so you can get more forced air, so you can get hotter furnaces. It also allows us to remove the impurities in coal. You see, coal is like iron ore. It's got all these different impurities in it, so it burns at a cooler temperature. Well, if we remove those impurities, we can have more efficient burning coal, which means a hotter fire, which is important because that allows us to smelt and to do all kinds of things that we need to do. It allows us to remove the impurities in iron and generally make better quality products. This is the thing we have to understand, though. Pure iron is not that great. It's an okay building material, but steel is what we want. The problem is that while we all think we know what steel is, we don't. Steel is a very general term, basically talking about a mix of iron and carbon. but the exact temperatures that go into making steel vary dramatically. Making a strong steel basically takes knowing exact percentages, which was essentially impossible for early people to do. Nowadays, we can get pretty much perfect steel. Steel we make today is the best steel that's ever been made. That's one thing that's very difficult to understand. There's almost a legend when it comes to making steel around the world, and it's very hard to make good steel. That's one of the reasons why there are certain like sword and armor makers in history who are renowned because they were able to get it really close to perfect with very bad tools. It's not that they were particularly better than what we make. In fact, they're inferior to what we make today. But it's something that, you know, for the time was amazing. So just something to consider. But anywho, these are some of the changes that are going to be happening and are going to lead to changes in the industrial age. Any questions? Yes.
When you were talking about the Titanic earlier, and you said like the makers of it like didn't use the right like stuff,
Yeah.
did they get like in trouble or sued or anything?
I think they did, yeah. I don't know the particulars, but I'm pretty certain I read that a long time ago. Yeah, they were. Because there's also the problem, at the time they didn't have radio contact constantly. They just would check in. And so basically that accident led to a law being introduced where ships have to constantly be in contact so that if something happens they can respond quicker. But yeah, there's a lot of things with the Titanic. Basically, it was a whole lot of oversights that led to a lot of problems. This is why, yeah, we have to understand something will eventually go wrong. That's engineering. In fact, you guys have probably heard of Murphy's Law, I'm assuming. You guys know Murphy's Law? Usually, usually people say, "Oh, that's Murphy's Law," whenever you reference something going bad at a really bad time. You know, it's like Murphy's Law, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. That's not actually what it means, though. Murphy's Law specifically states that something eventually is going to fail. That's just how it is. There's nothing we can make that's perfect. If you're in a car, a tire will go flat. You know, maybe a belt will snap. Something will go wrong. The question is, what happens when that thing goes wrong? You know what I'm saying? The objective of an engineer is to put enough fail-safes in that when something goes wrong, there's something else so that it's not catastrophic. In fact, we want multiple fail-safes. Take, for instance, gun safety. This is a great example of this. It is generally considered a very bad idea to have a loaded gun cocked and ready to go, so all you have to do is pull the trigger and it goes off. Why? Because kids find guns and they play with them. So generally, the method chosen for gun safety is 1, the gun is unloaded. 2, it is not cocked. 3, there's a safety actually on it so that it's engaged so you can't just pull the trigger. 3, there's a trigger lock on it. 4, the ammo is kept separate from the gun itself. The reason you do all these types of things, let's say a kid finds that gun, they're not going to be able to fire it. 1, because there's a trigger lock on it. Well, assuming they find your key and unlock the trigger lock, it's still got a safety on it. Let's say they find the trigger lock, they undo that, and they turn on the safety. There's no ammo in the gun. Let's say they try to go find the ammo in the gun. Well, it's not cocked. There's all these different steps that if something were to go wrong, you know, it's protected. Does that make sense? In the case of Titanic, not only was there bad steel, not only were they not in contact with the shore, but there wasn't enough lifeboats for everybody on board ship. It's like they were asking for massive cataclysmic death. And the reason they didn't think all this stuff was necessary because, oh, well, it's the biggest ship ever, it's strong enough, there's no way anything can sink it. It was basically hubris. That's one of the reasons why it's such a famous story. You know. Same thing with the Hindenburg. Are you guys familiar with that? It was an airship that was sent across the Atlantic Ocean. Basically, it was a giant blimp. And the thing is, it was made in Nazi Germany. So there's this infamous picture of this Nazi blimp basically going up in flames. Well, the fact is that it wasn't a warship. It was actually a passenger ship, like a cruise ship, just flew through the air. So think about that. How cool is that? It's a cruise ship, but in the sky. You know, the reason that it was a disaster was it was actually filled with hydrogen. which is explosive. Most blimps weren't actually at the time. They were filled with, I forget what actually, but it wasn't flammable. They had to because of a policy of the United States to keep them from getting this because we were trying to limit their war capabilities. Anyways, so what happened is they ended up pulling into this harbor, and the way that you came in with an airship is they would have these big tow cables that you would lower, and then I'm sure they would put these in giant engines. They basically pull you down. Well, when they connected to the ground, lightning struck the blimp that connected through the ground and basically caused the entire thing to explode. So this thing. Well, no, that's the weird thing is they were like 60 feet in the air, and some passengers decided, no, I'm 60 feet up, I'm going to jump out. Jump out and fall 60 feet and try to get out of the wreckage because it was on fire. Like it's this giant fireball. You can find clips of it on YouTube. It's the Hindenburg. You can look it up. Anyhow, as it's collapsing, you see this huge fireball. You're like, God, how could anyone live? It's like only like 9 people out of like 80 or 90 died. It's like, holy crap, how did that happen? It's like people were jumping out. People just walked out. It's like, dude, really? It's unbelievable. There's some crazy stories you can read in history of people surviving things. You're like, how could that happen? Like there was one guy in World War II. He had, I think, 2 or 3 planes shut up. No, it was 2. It was 2 planes. This guy was like the most lucky guy in the world. Like he was in World War II, right? He was in a bomber, and it was shot down. And he was the ball gunner. Basically, you'll see these planes. They've got like this little turret underneath them. And basically, it was suicide because if the plane has to crash land, you're going to get squished if you can't get out. So he was in that. So it's coming down, the plane's coming down. He's like, crap, I can't get out. Well, the plane crashes, and he somehow survives. He gets out. Second time he's on his plane, he's crushing on, the ball just drops off, just randomly, he falls out. And so he falls from like several hundred feet, crashes, and survives. This guy was on a passenger airplane. He's on a plane, just flying. If you guys have ever seen the TV show Lost, how the back end just falls off? Yeah, that happened. And he survived. He's been struck by lightning 6 times. Like, seriously, you read this, it's like, seems unbelievable. It's like, now someone made this up. It's totally true. Like, this dude is unbelievably lucky. He also won the lottery twice. I have no idea. I saw this one time. I was like, no! And like I could not believe it. Looked up, sure enough, it's all true. Well, you see, the thing is, like I said, he's unlucky, but he's also lucky. You know what I'm saying? Because all this bad stuff happens to him, but he survives. I think this is the dude who, I think he's besties with death, to be honest. Because, all this stuff happens to him, and Death's like, hey! He's like, hey! Like, all this bad stuff happens to him because Death wants to hang out and play foosball or something. Anyways, that's it for today, guys.
Died from something really stupid.
I think he died of old age.
Oh, he died?
I believe so.
Yeah, like someone just died.